Thank you all for being here today. We are so excited to talk about the heart of work in literacy, leveraging community volunteers. I am Brandon White, Director of Education with the United Way of Greater Nashville, and I'm joined by some really important people when it comes to deploying volunteers. And they're just as important as all of you, right? Because I'm sure, raise your hand, how many of you work with volunteers in your programs or in your classrooms? Every one of us, yeah. So this truly is an important topic. We know that in Tennessee, volunteering is important. We love to show up, right? So how do we make sure that showing up is meaningful? How do we do it well and with intention? And how do we make sure that volunteers are prepared, that they come back to your programs, and make sure that the community really wants those volunteers and knows how to use them, that they're making the impact that we need. So what a great topic for today, everybody. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go down, starting with you, Linda, if you don't mind, if you'll introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the program that you work with, and how are you using volunteers in your program right now? What role are they playing for your agency?
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Abel, and I am from Ray County, which is north of Chattanooga. It's Dayton, home of the famous Scopes Trial Courthouse, celebrating 100 years since that happened. So I am a retired educator. I've taught special needs kids and then had several years in admin and retired about 9 years ago. So then I had time to get involved with Imagination Library. I knew it, I pushed it, I talked about it, but I wasn't really helping. And so I had time to get started with that and kind of grow. We had one person trying to run our DIPL program. We use a lot of retired teachers, and our board is not very big, but retired teachers I think are your number one go-to because they get it. You can skip a lot of the intro with them. And it really doesn't matter what area they've taught, whether it be literacy or shop or whatever. They know the importance. If you can read, you can do just about anything else. So I really shop around former colleagues and people from schools that I didn't work in, but I know that they're strong in volunteering. And so we keep a pretty small group, but we manage to get things done. And I'm trying to diversify a little bit. We have our first male board member coming on board to handle, he's full-time teacher, but he's going to do some media for us that I just don't feel qualified to do, and we need a bigger reach with our Facebook page and some other things. So we have a good group, but we're always looking for more people.
Hi, I'm Caroline Lewis, and I work for Bookham in Davidson County, and I run the reading programs there, and my entire job is volunteers. And so this is Bookham's 35th year, whoop, whoop. And I was handed a really robust group of volunteers, but we're always looking to grow and have been working hard to do that. And so I run the reading programs there, and so my biggest one is Reading is Fundamental, which pairs about 300 volunteers with a teacher, and they go in 5 times in the school year and read in their classroom. And then we also have 2 early learning centers where volunteers go in and read weekly to the students those are 3 and 4-year-olds, of course. And then we have Read Me Day that are big reading celebrations in the spring. They're lots of fun, and it's a great way to get people pulled in that may not have the bandwidth to do some of our other programs. But Bookham also has a really robust volunteer group of volunteer groups that are corporate partners, individual partners. They will have people that just transport books for us, or we have people that will just come. They'll even cover events if we're not available sometimes. So we certainly work in volunteers all day long, and it's a joy and a challenge sometimes.
Hello, my name is Brittany Smith. So I have a bunch of hats, so I'm sorry. And I promise I am at the right conference. I work full-time at Eastman Chemical Company, and I'm in the process of starting a nonprofit, which I have the paperwork here with me. So our group, we have been collecting gently used books and new books, and we've been distributing in areas that were affected by Hurricane Helene. We live about 2 streets over, back behind us, and everything was just kind of ravished. So we have served, to date, 8 counties. We've traveled all over. And so that's kind of the gist of us. As far as volunteers, I really like what Linda said. We work with a lot of retired teachers. I feel like they get us. I don't have to explain anything, and they basically help the child that comes up to our table. They pick out an age-appropriate book for them. And so we also distribute Bibles and cookbooks to family members that have lost everything. So our volunteers, we have book drives almost every weekend where we're out in the community, different locations, whether it be working with the Second Harvest Food Bank, United Way, local schools, public libraries, etc. So.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you so much for having me on this panel today. I'm looking through the crowd and I see more qualified people than I up here. Brooke Siegel, and I'm the Senior Manager for Imagination Library of Middle Tennessee. My footprint covers Davidson, Sumner, and Williamson County kids and caregivers. In terms of volunteers, I have a couple of different groups that I manage, and just to reflect on what Brittany said, is doing nonprofit work, we wear so many hats. So could I be stronger with my volunteer efforts? Absolutely. Do I feel like I'm doing the best within my capacity? Absolutely. So we all have room to grow. That's why we're here today, to learn. And I can speak more to my different groups of volunteers, but I have 3 main ones. One is my advisory board that I put together. I run my Imagination Library like a tiny 501c3 within the larger one that I am affiliated with. So there's my advisory board. And then I have a program within Imagination Library that I created several years ago called Read Baby Read. And those are my boots on the ground. They live into my mission of what we do with Imagination Library. And so that's my second large group. And then third is the work that we do in the community. So I will engage corporate, small businesses, individuals, and I'll speak more to those as the questions get asked. Thank you.
I'm Sandy Arnold, and I work for Save the Children U.S. We are a United States and also international nonprofit organization. So, of course, with working with nonprofit, you have to have funding available through grants and other entities with like state government and federal government. So my challenge is to my volunteers is buy-in. Because when we get that buy-in from our volunteers, then they can go out and they can say, hey, look what Save the Children is doing for our students. There are 3 entities with Save the Children, and that is community-oriented, Early Steps, which is like before school, and then I represent school age. I have 4 counties in West Tennessee that I support with supplemental curriculum. And we utilize our volunteers for that purpose to help us supplement the curriculum that's already in place. And like I said, the main thing for our volunteers is to get them with that buy-in so we can promote to other stakeholders that we have that this is important work.
That's a big footprint. So all across the state, volunteers are filling some really critical roles, not just direct contact, maybe it's reading to kids, but you're noticing too administrative functions, governance functions, right? That's really critical. I'm wondering, volunteers like to show up, right? And one of the healthy signs of a good volunteer infrastructure is mobility, right? Can you call on your volunteers to really show up when you need them? So what innovative or creative approaches have you all seen really work well in the field to mobilize volunteers and to get people to show up when you need them the most? And Sandy, I'll let you start that question.
Absolutely. I go by the COF, is what I call it. COF is communication, organization, and follow-up. You know, you communicate by email, by text, personalize. When you personalize to someone, use their name and make them feel like that, you know them by their first name and you want them there with you. And so you communicate like that. Then you organize. You have it organized by email, what job that you want them to do, and not just say, okay, show up. You know, I said, well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. And, you know, because I've organized lots of things with school age, and we've organized like teacup carnivals and things like that. You have to show them specifically what direction you want them to go. So, and then follow up. After it's done, follow up with the email. I appreciate you so much. And say something specifically. So that's going to be on your part, you know. Say something specifically that you saw that they were doing, so they will show up again. Say, hey, they really acknowledged what I was doing, and they saw what I was doing, and they followed up with my name on an email. Thank you so much for showing up, and, you know, showing your talent, because sometimes somebody has a talent for something, and showing, you know, sharing what they had with you. And so be specific so they will show up again. Say, hey, I liked that email I got from you, and I will show up again.
Wow, I couldn't have said that better. Pretty much hit the nail on the head with that one. So the way Imagination Library of Middle Tennessee does opportunities for volunteers in terms of communicating out with them, I have the unique opportunity of working with Hands on Nashville. So they're part of United Way Greater Nashville now. So they can put out my specific opportunities out into the community, out into this huge network of potential volunteers. So to me, that's a tier 1 kind of outreach. And then tier 2 is my personal networks, my colleagues' networks. So this is less personal communication, right? But we're spreading the net really far. So then my tier 3 would be your COF. Definitely. So I don't have much more to add to that. I think my point is to utilize your networks, utilize your peers, your colleagues, different places. It just doesn't have to go out to your established volunteer network, because we all know that people's passions and interests are going to change with each volunteer opportunity. Somebody may love early literacy, but they're not going to come sit and table all day for you, okay? So
be creative. So something that I've done is reached out to homeschool groups. You know, consider the populations that don't get that activity. So like with the homeschool groups, I reached out to them and said, hey, can you help me with this project? I'm helping to distribute books out in the community. How can you help me? And so we found blank bookmarks for them to decorate. So they customized bookmarks, and so when I received them back from them, I would hand them out at the book events. So it's collaborating with groups beyond your reach, and, you know, just make those connections, most importantly.
I mean, this really piggybacks, but I think for me, I'm always looking for ways to diversify our readership. We love our retired teachers. We do, but I always am wanting to find more readers that reflect the students that they're reading to. So it's kind of those ways of looking into groups that we have relationships and that we don't. Don't be afraid to cold call, cold email someone and say, hey, this is why this is a need here and we need you. And there's a lot of people, if they are just asked, they are happy to respond. And so I think that for me, when I first started, it felt so big where I was like, well, I don't like people to sell stuff to me. And it's not the same with volunteerism. And is what I've found, that people really, if they know that you have that need and a specific need for them to fill, so a student or whomever it is sees themselves in you, then it really can make a difference. And I think this feels really elementary, but giving volunteers a good experience, they are absolutely your best advocates. They advocate for my program way better than I do. I mean, we're registering right now for the Reading is Fundamental. And when I say, how did you hear about us? 90%, my friend, my neighbor, my boss. And so I think it's really being intentional with those and then giving them ways. They will naturally advocate for you, but we'll send stuff to our board members and be like, here's a templated email for you to send this to your people to say. I mean, it kind of takes a little bit of the work out of it for them, but it's giving them easy ways to say, here, reach out to your networks. Because sometimes people, they do it themselves, but they don't recognize that they really need to push it out into the community, and they will for you if you just make it easy for them. So,
I think with our volunteers, you have to make sure that you have somebody, well, hopefully they're comfortable being fairly bold sometimes. You know, we call ourselves stroller chasers. Are any of you stroller chasers? I do that in Walmart and at the park. If somebody's got a baby in a stroller, and I've walked up on one with a dog, so careful. But you have to be bold to say, oh, excuse me, is your child registered for Imagination Library? Or do you know about our book bus? Any of those kind of programs. And I try to be, you know, not creepy about it, so you kind of just know. But you have to sort of have that talk with people who are volunteering for you, so you're kind of presenting a united front. And I think they're more comfortable once they get into that speech pattern, I guess, for lack of a better word. But I find that volunteers will really hang around when you treat them right and treat them to lunch every once in a while. And they bring good ideas. It's a relaxed atmosphere. Some of them are away from a job because we have some business people on our board. But just to sit back and just kind of chew what we're doing, talk about where we need to go, where we're not serving. Why aren't we getting any enrollment from up on this mountain? Well, we haven't been there. So you can't be afraid to approach people. And I think you also need to make sure that you're reaching all the different groups of people in your county. Ours is small, but we've got, you know, mountain and valley and everything in between. And maybe our enrollment's not what it should be there. Just want to keep it.
Be bold and be creative. All right. Sometimes we get stuck in a work loop where your head is down, you're hyper-focused, maybe you're underwater. And for small programs especially, and even big programs, sometimes getting volunteers and training them well can be a daunting task, right? So what would you recommend as a really strong recruitment strategy? Where are you finding your volunteers? How are you attracting them to the work in that first moment of interaction? And I'm going to give it to Linda. And Linda, I'm giving it to you because you're a volunteer. That's right. Doing this as a team on your own. Yeah, how are you doing?
Well, I'm not shy, and everybody that knows me knows that. So I don't have trouble talking. Volunteering is fun, and I'm so glad I have time to do it now. Even people that work, because we have some people that still work on our board, they can help us in other ways. They're not necessarily out there chasing people. As I mentioned, we've got a young man who's going to help us with our media. We've needed that for a long time. But I feel like training them, and everybody's not going to ask these questions the same way, but you know, we need to make sure we're consistent in how we fill out a form for registration. You've got to make sure all that information's there. Please don't register somebody that's already 6. You know, it makes a workload probably in bigger systems. And, you know, chat the parent up a little bit. You know, are you familiar with this? But I feel like that our training, if you want to call it that, it's kind of soft, but I feel like, there's always room for improvement. And so hopefully I'm hearing something today that'll help me and transfer that on. And somebody mentioned always saying thank you. Sandy, I think that was you. Thank you notes have gone out of style. I was raised to do that, and I still do that. If somebody donates money to us, they get a handwritten thank you note. It's not an email. It's not something I just print off. It's handwritten with a stamp. And I think that people probably really appreciate that. I know that's a little bit off topic, but courtesy should not ever go out of style. And I do thank them for the money because they're keeping us afloat.
We have new thank you cards and promo kit for that reason.
Yay, thank you.
That's 9 out of 9 times, not 10 out of 10, because there's always one person that doesn't agree. But 9 out of 10 times, folks rave about getting just a handwritten thank you. This goes a long way.
Because things are so automated and so that personal touch goes a long way to show that you are grateful for what they have done.
Yes.
It's hard to follow the thank you notes now. I think for recruitment purposes, it is, I think what I was speaking to a little bit earlier, but to just broaden it, is that, and a lot of this was not done by me, it was done by people before me in my organization, but if you're looking for, if I'm looking for maybe a working class crowd, or maybe not my retired teachers crowd, but someone, then go to Rotary, go to Junior League, go to people, go find groups and organizations where those people are, and be, like she said, be bold, be targeted in that asking. I'm always looking for bilingual readers, and so I'm like, who knows Ruben DePena at the Tennessean? You know people that know people, and even if you don't know them, he puts it out for you. And so people will, if you go to them kindly, if you ask, then they're willing to, even if they can't do it. I can't tell you how many people. I send it to the Chamber of Commerce. Can you send it to your business organizations? I can't volunteer, but I'll push it out. Churches, there's a huge network, and I recognize I'm speaking from Davidson County. It's not the same as some of our more rural folks, but there's a lot of pockets of organizations, and sometimes a lot of it is you're going to them. It's work, and I thankfully, so a lot of that work was done before me, but we're still always looking for new ways to engage people, because there's a lot of people that are waiting to be asked. And so I think it's just finding them and being willing to go, to ask, to call, to email, and get your organizations doing the same for you. Sorry. I'm so sorry. That was really rude. I will say, having your volunteers speak, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But having your volunteers speak a personal story into it makes that difference. It's not just that ask. It's using your quotes, but them getting that information. Because when I first started, I sent out 47,000 emails. And then when I started having a volunteer give me a quote, or I grabbed it off of a survey or something like that, or they sent that email with their personal story, it makes such a huge difference. So people will answer, but it is that personalization. I will not grab it back again, I promise. I know, I'm sorry.
I forgot the question now. No, no, I'm just kidding.
It is also.
Just to follow up, what they said is, communication, and for us, we serve on the Washington County Long-Term Recovery Group, and then underneath that, we're on the Spiritual and Emotional Committee. And so we have, where I work full-time, it's hard for me to attend meetings, and so I've had volunteers that consistently go to those meetings to fill in for me. But for that aspect, it's, if you see your volunteers consecutively and then suddenly they just kind of disappear, it's good to follow up with those people, and say, hey, I noticed you haven't been here in a while. You okay? Is everything all right? And sometimes just those words of, encouragement on that part, follow up with them too and say, oh yeah, I really care about, what you're doing, and I've had a rough day, I've had a death in the family, some type of excuse, whatever the situation may be. But it's good to follow up with your volunteers in that aspect and, saying thank you. And after each event, I'll follow up, do a follow-up email. Say, hey, I really appreciate your, your attendance and your, what all you supplied and your feedback. And, just thanks for being a great rock and support system for me. And so that makes a huge difference.
Okay, so this is going to be a long story long. Let me give you a concrete example. So when I started this position in January of 2018, I'm under the educational umbrella at United Way Greater Nashville. Okay, so I would be getting all these phone calls, and people are like, can I volunteer for this and that? And I'm like, yeah, let me transfer you. And I was like, I need my own volunteers, but I need a good opportunity for my volunteers. So I created Read Baby Read. We read to infants and toddlers in area Davidson County daycares. We started with one. It was our little pilot daycare, and we quickly added up to 8, okay? So now at this point, and infant and toddler classrooms are not large. They're just a handful of kids, maybe 8 to 10 at the most. But now at this point, we've read to over 4,000 kids, and this is on a weekly basis, total volunteer driven, grassroots. But in terms of recruitment, so I have sat around a lot of tables in the education space in Davidson County, in Sumner County, in Williamson County. But like the other ladies have said, we are our own ambassadors for our program, but part of our job with these volunteers is to train them to be our ambassadors, either with training sessions, and I'll speak more to that in just a second, or with a fantastic volunteer experience that they can take to their circles. I've gotten more volunteers by word of mouth, zero advertising, zero anything that I've done. It's been those volunteers out there sharing their passion for how they spend their spare time and spend their volunteer time. So in terms of recruitment, I have seriously just relied on providing a great experience that fills their cup, and then they go out and talk about it. The other piece of that is the training piece. For this particular program underneath Imagination Library, we do a one-day training, and it's only a half a day, to be quite honest. It's super well organized. They know exactly what they're going to do when they go into a daycare center. They know point of contacts. All of my volunteers have my own cell phone number. That may be too much for you guys, but that's how I operate because those relationships are so important to me. The second piece of that is that they're all trained on how we talk about the program. So all of my volunteers say the same things about Imagination Library when they're at cocktail parties, when they're at their church, when they're at their, whatever, they're playing pickleball, whatever. If Imagination Library comes up or Read Baby Read comes up, we all have the same message. And so that's how we're disseminating information out into the community. And that's why we get such a good return on volunteers. Not saying this is the best formula, but just for example of how we do it at Imagination Library in Middle Tennessee.
It is. I feel like a kid in a candy store because that's what you all are the volunteers for the Dollarwood Foundation. Mm-hmm. And you just, almost verbatim, when I bring on new local program partners in other states outside of Tennessee, is exactly that. I'm talking to them in the way that you're talking to their volunteers. So we've passed along this information, and it's you, grassroots, that's doing that work. And I'm so excited to hear that that's how you do it.
High five.
Because and I know processes have changed so much in the last 3-4 years at the foundation. We actually have an onboarding process now. I know before it was, you love the program, I love the program, let's get this done. Sorry, I didn't mean to, but
Oh, that's okay.
so
You're
excited.
fine.
Because in that process now, we talk a lot about branding, how we talk about the program, what we don't say. It's not for just this or that. And I feel like I'm just like, my heart's beating hard. Like it's
That is a beautiful segue into what Save the Children is all about, because we are about branding and processing, and because we have a child safeguarding process that we, want volunteers to go through as well. But being with school age, we have an advantage because we have a target population, and we send home like a registration packet for our school-age programs with Save the Children. And so on that registration is, can you share any of your talents or skills at a certain point? Because we're mainly after-school programming. And can you share any talents? And we go by the STEM, science, technology, and all this. So we want to involve our parents and involve not just parents, but central office staff, other teachers. We've had a teacher come and volunteer to teach crocheting, things like this. So we ask, put your interest and your talents and your skills on this paper, and then we go through and we say, hey, I see where you like photography. Can you come to our after-school program and, show our kids about photography? Sure, I'd love to share my talent. I'd love to share that. So that's pretty much how we recruit with Save the Children. And, of course, we use all of our community collaboratives that we have. We have stakeholders, and that's people in the community. And I know we have a READ program in Crockett County, and Miss Ashley Hall had businesses come to the school. She had Gibson Electric come. They brought the electric truck and showed the kids about that. You're going to pique an interest maybe of a child at that point. Say, hey, this is something that I might like to do. So it's a win-win because they're getting a possible employee in a few years, and they already know about this. So recruiting, just share your talents and share your interest with others.
Some really great advice in this room. Be bold, be creative, be consistent, be personable. Build a brand so that volunteers are recruiting volunteers. Wow. So, in a world of rich opportunities for volunteers, and many ways that they help us stay afloat when budgets are tight and work is heavy. What are some challenges that you've faced with working with volunteers, and what have you learned from those experiences? And we've got about 10 minutes, yeah.
So far, I can't think of any except maybe that they can't commit to like a whole day or a whole afternoon. So that's where the organization comes in and you are flexible. And maybe you have groups of students, because I'm, of course, school age, groups of students that want to go to one thing and some other groups. So your organizational skills come into that. So the only challenge that I have found with working with Save the Children and volunteers is that the flexibility that sometimes people cannot. I mean, it's not that they don't want to, but they can't donate a whole day, but they could donate an hour or something like that, because they are sometimes taking time away from their business and things like that. I want to share with you, we had some students who got their AR goals. That's accelerated reader, and they met their AR goals. So I talked to the superintendent of that school, and I said, I want to have supper with the super, and I want you to read to the kids. So we did. We had supper with the super, and the kids loved it. They got their picture made with them, and he read to them, and it was because they met their AR goals. So just make it fun. Make it inviting, and be flexible. Flexible is, the key.
Once again, everything she said is spot on. I'll give you another long story long. I'll try to make this one shorter. So one of the challenges I face is board diversity, okay? The way that I pick my board is I want you to be, I want you to enjoy this work, enjoy this time around this table, but I'm also asking for a specific reason. I'm asking because you have a connection, you have funding opportunities for me. Your circle, your social circle is who I want to break into. Do I need you to be on a committee in a certain county? So those are all things that I'm thinking about. I need more boys on my board. I have one. Which corporation are you affiliated with? And then also the other challenge of that is I'm a United Way employee, so they also run an internal campaign. So I have to be really careful whom I approach within the community as well. But I'm just sharing this as a challenge. I don't really know the answer to it, except that it's a case-by-case basis, and I have to stay on top of it, and I just have to, not get too bogged down by it. But in saying all of this, if anyone has ideas for me, please see me after this. I'd love to be able to diversify my board better and more easily. One way, besides just not getting too bogged down by it, is just when sharing volunteer opportunities. That's part of it. I have one Read Baby Read volunteer. She was a high-level executive in Chicago for years. I originally asked her to sit on my board. She said, "Brooke, I love you, but I do not ever want to sit in another meeting again in my life." And I said, "Oh, let me tell you about Read Baby Read." She's been a dedicated weekly volunteer reading to infants and toddlers at 2 of my daycare centers for the past 7 years. So, but it's just, once again, it's just finding that spot. But that is one of the challenges that I face is a diverse board.
Scheduling conflicts is my biggest one. So my group, I'll give you a backstory of our name. So Appalachian Books and Blessings, I started in memory of my grandfather. My grandfather, he passed away 5 years ago, and he couldn't read. And so I thought initially, whenever we were devastated by Hurricane Helene, I thought about everything that people had lost. And something that I thought was, those children with disabilities and the children that most vulnerable, that really struggle academically, people need help, and not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And so, so our group, I thought, what if we had people, like us, to go into communities to share the wealth of literacy, people like my grandfather could have been able to read. And so, so this organization is like my child now, because, it's in memory of my grandfather. And so forcing myself to trust people, that they have my best interest at heart as well, has been one of my biggest struggles. When you pour your heart and soul into something and so passionate about it, and you find volunteers that really want to help you, you have to question, like every little thing, are they going to do a great job? Are they going to represent me well? Are they, and at the end of the day, you have to trust people.
Can I give you some piece to that?
Yes.
That was Dolly's story, and she trusts over 2,500 local program partners in the country, and you all do exactly that, because you trust her dream that she took for her father. And that's we are entrusted to make sure that dream is perpetuated through the local program partners.
Yeah.
And when you have that shared passion and people come to you saying, "How can I help?" and relinquishing that trust.
Yeah.
Like, how do I ensure I'm bringing on the right local program partner? Are
Yeah.
they going to be the heartbeat of and do the work? And in 3 years, I've not had any come that have been nefarious. I mean, one nefarious partner. But I'm very proud of you. That's
Thank you. But yeah, just trust. You have to let things go and just believe in people.
I think one of the things that's a challenge for me sometimes are people's kind of preconceived notions of what volunteering should be exactly, especially in specific roles. So for my biggest program, then volunteers read in classrooms. And so even though we go through a pretty pretty, I think, good training that they get all the information and hear all the things, and they still come with their frustrations and what they think it should be. That if a teacher isn't contacting them back, why don't they care about reading? I'm like, that's not where that lives, So I think a lot of that is just learning to take the time to talk to people through that. And their stories matter too, where they're coming from matters. And when you listen to them and can talk through that with them. And sometimes I don't have opportunity. A lot of times mine's through email, and that can be a hard thing to achieve. But I think I would get really frustrated because I'm seeing the problems. My whole job is trying to mitigate these problems to make this run smoothly. And so really trying to not see the volunteer as the problem, but trying to find where they're coming from. And second, sometimes help that is not helpful. We get that a lot in nonprofit. It's like, we need children's books that are new or like new. We are very clear on that. And they're like, I would love to give you my psychology textbook from 1975. And I'm like, that is beautiful for Goodwill, not for me. And yes, and there is a fit for it somewhere, and that it's okay to say no. And it's okay that there's a difference in being kind and being nice. And sometimes our niceness makes so much work for us that we are not able to do our jobs effectively. So for me, when I first come in, I'm like, yes to all the things. We need to do all the things. And then quickly, I'm not effective for anyone in that way. And so that it really can be not even okay, but what is necessary to say no when it's necessary to be able to give a good experience for the volunteers that you are engaging. And so that was a hard and still sometimes a hard lesson for me. So I'll be like, yes, I would love to come downtown and pick up your books, even though we don't do that, because it's hard to say no because you feel like that's taking books out of kids' hands. But if you're not able to run your programs, then you're not helping anyone if you're saying yes to everyone.
When we started our book bus, we did a book drive with all of our schools. We got over 10,000 books. A lot of them were the teachers' old textbooks from college. So we just picked up everything. We picked it all up. We had a contest. The school with the smallest population won a trophy because they had like almost 5 books donated per child. But McKay's is wonderful, and I'm sorry to say this because it pains me. The dumpster saw several things, and they just weren't, a 1957 set of World Book. They went to McKay's. So we took that money and put it back in our program. So let me get back on topic. I think I really haven't had much problem with our volunteer group. However, this 2 or 3 years ago, we had somebody express an interest who's a local business person and gave us a good sum of money, several $1,000s through her company. And then I never saw her again. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's me. I try to communicate. I emailed, I called and left messages, I texted. And after about a year of that, I thought, this is not working for me because you're not working for me. And, mom, toddler, that type of thing. But I thought, maybe I can take something off your plate. So the way I handled it, and maybe it wasn't the right way, I typed up a letter that was mailed to each board member. Positive start. Here's 3 things we accomplished in the last few months. We've increased our enrollment. We've moved our percentage up by the state, and on and on. And I said, however, when I contact some of you, I don't ever get a response. I thought that was the nicest way I could put it, but to just, lay it out there. And I said, if you want to remain on the board, please let me know by such and such date. It was like 2 weeks from then. So I figured no matter how slow the mail was, they would get it. I still haven't heard from her. That was about a year ago. So I said, I assume, if I don't hear from you, I assume that you no longer wish to be on the board. Thank you for your service. We appreciate it. And so that person's no longer on my board. I hope she realizes that. But that's the only time I've ever had to do that. And I had a nice call from one lady who's worked at our Bryan College had changed so much more that she was like doubly loaded down. She said, I do not have the time anymore, and I will still continue to promote literacy, which I really appreciated that. And I sent her a note, even called her, and I said, I appreciate the time that you spent with us. Sometimes you just have to get in the nitty gritty because that wasn't helping our unit, our affiliate. But we're going to fill that spot in. So we're always looking for people to help us out. I don't think there's any limit to the amount of volunteers we would want to help us out. We'll find a job for them.
Well, I'll give my own quick answer to that, and we'll go into our last question. I think running volunteer programs for as long as I have, a consistent challenge that people sometimes think about and talk about is that it's hard to breathe enough to bring somebody in and show them how to do your job or parts of your job and give up a little bit of control. And we see that not just among administrative volunteers, but also volunteers stepping into classrooms where teachers feel a sense of protection. It's their classroom, it's their kids, it's their results. And getting people to breathe and give that control up and accept support can be hard. But I think a lesson that I've learned is that it's so impactful to have bi-directional exposure between community members and kids, right? Because they don't often put the emphasis we need them to in early years, and we don't always understand what a challenge literacy really is. So think about that. Our last question is if you could give one piece of advice to someone building or growing a volunteer program, what would it be?
I would say to build a volunteer program, be transparent. Be transparent in what your goal, state your goal. This is the goal, and have them help you with the steps to that goal. So they would have a little bit of ownership, I would say. They have a little bit of ownership with it. So this is our goal. We need to reach this goal. What steps do you think that we're going to need to reach this goal? So be transparent, be open, and be honest.
So foundational. I would add to that the characteristic of gratitude, just the most gratitude that you can give someone else. And you've all heard different ways to do that, and you know how you like to receive gratitude. Just showing that to others for their time and energy and their passion about your particular program. For example, my birthing hospital nurses on my labor and delivery floors, I take them donuts on Valentine's Day every year because, well, I do a whole little treat basket for them, like chapstick, hand sanitizer, donuts, little granola bars, all kinds of stuff, and I'll take them a big thing of flowers too. And I do that for all of my birthing hospitals because they work their butts off and they're doing volunteer work for me, signing up newborn babies. So that is the least amount of gratitude I can show them.
Be patient. Less is more. Have faith. So at our first book drive, we went to C5 in Cott County with Jennifer Ellison, and we had a bunch of books donated that I thought were like questionable, old school, like no one's going to want this junk. So, I mean, it was Mary Kate and Ashley books, and I was like, is anyone going to know who they are really? I mean, would you know?
Yes, I do.
Well, okay. But anyways, I thought, no one's going to want this. And just about as we were about to end our event, this car comes hauling in there. They come running out of the car and they say, we heard about your event and we lost all of our books in the flood. We lost our whole entire library collection. And they were like, what time do you close? And I was like, 10 minutes ago. But I was like, since you lost everything, please take your time. Like, I don't want to take all this stuff back home because I have a couple thousand books in my basement right now and in my garage, and my whole house is flooded with books. But that's not a bad thing. But anyways, back to the story. So as they were looking through the books, they opened the box of Mary Kate and Ashley, and lo and behold, those were the books they lost. So just because you think you have an old textbook or a book that you think is not going to cut it, no one's going to grab it, they're going to think it's junk, someone's going to come along and say, that's what I've been looking for. That's what I've been searching for. That's what I've been needing. That's what I've been wanting, you know. So have faith in that aspect, that just because you think it's a junk book doesn't mean someone else thinks it's junk. And lastly, be passionate. If others see you be passionate about something, then they will see that light and it will grow into something bigger. So.
You're a hard act to follow. Mine sounds a lot. For me, this work is hard, y'all. It is the greatest joy of my life, to work with the people I work with and the volunteers I work with. But recognizing your bandwidth and the bandwidth of your organization is pivotal. And that's something that I'm learning more slowly sometimes, but I think it is that, and communicating that to other people is okay. That I think all of us, we are helpers by nature. That's why we do this work. And so, but I think that is something that, and helping other people see that their bandwidth matters and finding ways that you can pull that from them in a healthy way for you is really, really important.
Somebody mentioned the passion, and I think you have to have that. And I think you can't be afraid to ask. You know, you're asking for volunteers, you're asking for help, you're asking for money. But I think you also have to be willing to listen. And I struggle with that because I think, well, I've been doing this a long time. But be open to suggestions for improvement, or we need to stop this that we're doing. It's not working. And I need to grow in that area myself. But I think it's just always got to be a two-way street.
So we have about 5 more minutes. Does anyone in the audience have a question that they'd like to ask our panelists?
None?
I have a whole list of stuff
Come
to
on.
say.
I got a question. What's so hot here?
Yes, it's a good question. We frozen the Williams. It's a great question.
It's a question we'll never.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying. So, I do have a question. So, we're a small staff, only 4 part-time, I'm the only full-time. And we've been doing this for over 20 years. Do you all, on your nonprofits, have like a form that they fill out? I mean, besides their information, like a contract or like liability? Do you do anything like that with your volunteers?
Well, so we have a volunteer interest form that everyone can fill out, that kind of, because we have a lot of different programs, not just mine, certainly, and then registration for each separate program. All of my volunteers are all background checked for sure going into classrooms. They do have to sign a volunteer policy sheet each year that shows this is what you're agreeing to. That's pretty much the extent. Right? Am I missing anything to my boss here? Anybody else?
I have to say, Caroline is fabulous. You cannot steal her away.
I did not tell her to say that.
Yeah, no, really. It takes somebody, this is hard work, like she said, and it takes people like you all that have the right attitude, have the passion, have the organizational skills to do that kind of work. So, kudos to you all.
To answer your question, I do not do contracts with my volunteers. Background checks are always done if we're around children. My board members do sign a contract. They're volunteers as well, but my board members do sign a contract.
And you can also, we do background checks because, of course, school age, we're around students, but also you have the 2-person rule, that no volunteer is ever alone with a student. There's always 2 people.
Yes, liability is a very important thing to always have covered. I would just say too, Julian, I think it depends on what you're asking of that volunteer. If it's show up, deliver something, be part of this group, advocate, hold a sign, that's a different ask. If you want consistency from someone who's going to come every week to sit in a classroom and read to a kid because they've signed up for a semester, that needs a commitment letter, right? You're going to get more consistency, and a volunteer's going to feel like the quality and caliber of their work are more important and impactful if they sign something. So you're going to get better attendance. You're going to get better consistency out of that volunteer. But that depends, right? And that may be different from a rural community perspective to the big city, right?
Well, I think what's notable about all of this is that this work is scalable, right? So regardless of if you live in a mountain community in your rural or, downtown Nashville, this is all scalable information.
I think we've got time for one more question. Sure.
This could be for everybody, but I was thinking about you specifically, Brooke, when you were talking about diversifying your board, would, and excuse my ignorance on this because I don't know organizationally if United Way can allow this, but have you approached like seniors at high schools to be on your board and do like a junior board program?
I have not, and that's a good idea to put in my pocket.
We just did that, not for the Imagination Library, but for another nonprofit that I'm a member of in my community. I was the youngest member, and they needed somebody younger than me that had that social media aspect, drive and want to do. Like, I don't mind to do it, but I don't really want to do it.
Right.
And there were 2 high school students, one junior, one senior. They had to be 17 or older, and I do believe a 17-year-old had to have the parents sign off.
Okay.
And they're full board members. They have the same voting capacity that I have. They attend every meeting. They have an impressive resume. They bring so much value to our board. They're eager, and they have much more flexible schedules than we do, and can get more accomplished in the community and reach those younger minds that we're trying to get to.
Yeah,
So,
great. Thank you.
might
Good
be a way
idea.
To piggyback off of that, colleges like Lipscomb, and they have nonprofit management classes. And those folks are learning, so to be on a nonprofit board or, and hitting those places like cable, the professional women's group or, Kiwanis or any of those as well. I mean, they're on those committees, but.
Thank you. Anybody else?
High school students in volunteer positions? Well, I'll give you guys one really good example of board diversity since we're on that topic. I would challenge you, if this is a subject of interest, to go look at the Maddox Foundation, which is a local grant maker here in Middle Tennessee. And I think one thing that's made Maddox so successful in diversifying their board is a strong mission statement and alignment, because people of diversity have to see themselves in the mission of what you're doing and feel like it's for them to want to show up and sit and do advice, right? So a lot of that's in messaging as well. But Maddox Foundation has done an incredible job. They're very forward about their diversity language, and that is a tough thing to do right now. We know, right? But it's important.
Can you spell it?
MADDOX. All right, I'm going to do a recap, and then we're going to take a break. Be patient. Be flexible. Be personable and passionate. Be consistent. Be creative. Be bold. Some great advice. Thanks for joining us, everybody.